Okay, so welcome back to this tutorial. Today we're going to talk about controlling access to files using ACLs. And what ACL stands for, it actually stands for Access Control Lists. Now, if you remember that in our previous tutorials, there was a point we talked about the file permissions. And we all know all these types of file permissions. For example, a file, whether it's a .txt file or it's a directory file, we have three permissions. These permissions is read, we have write, and then we have execute. Now, when we talk about these files, they are actually also grouped in different ways. We have a section because for a file, either it's a directory or it's a .txt file. You see, this particular file is being altered, or it can be either owned between three portions. One, we have users. That means the file can be owned by users. The file can also be owned by groups, and the file can also be, in terms of accessibility of the file, it's not about the owning. But of course, we know that the default user, if you're to create a file as user A, you will be the owner or the sole owner of that particular file. But the same file can be accessed by groups or users that are within a certain group. And it can also be accessed by other users who are not the owner and who are not also in the group that the same file is. So we have three sections. We have the users, we have the groups, and then lastly, we have the others. So in this case, we need, first of all, to talk about what is ACL and in relation to Red Hat Enterprise Linux operating system. So when we talk about ACLs, for instance, if I can just key in Red Hat. So this is how we connect to a specific, we switch the user, or in other words, connect to a specific user. So when we talk about ACLs, or when we talk about access control list in Linux, we are actually talking about permissions in extension to an already existing permission, which is actually the read, write, and execute. Now, the importance of having these permissions is nothing less compared to what? To the already existing permissions. Now, for this case, it's only that we are applying an additional, more flexible permission mechanism to our file systems. So in other words, when you talk about access, let's say control lists, this is exactly what you're talking about, ACLs. So we normally talk about ACLs. So when you talk about access control list, we can define it as it provides, it's actually a type of permission, or it's actually a type of control that provides an additional, more flexible permission mechanism for file systems. It is actually designed to assist with the Linux or the Unix file permissions, which are already in place. So you cannot actually work with ACLs without having the default word permissions. So ACLs must be applied in line with what? With the existing file permissions. So ACL also allows you to give permissions for any user or group to any disk resource. So it's allowed, we have an allowance. As far as we're using the ACLs, we can actually give permissions for any user or groups to any resource. Now, the second question is, why use ACLs? Why use ACLs? Now, I want you to think of a scenario in which a particular user is not a member of group created by you, but still you want to give some read or write access. How can you do it without making user a member of group? So by doing so, then comes what? Comes the picture, or comes access control use, or comes now the use of what? the ACLs, because ACLs help us to do such tricks. So the scenario again is more of that we're assuming that you have a user who is not a member of a group. And when you talk about having a user is not a member of a group, for example, let me switch to, I don't know, let me see, where am I, PWD. Okay, so I can have desktop. So if I just execute, okay, let me get rid of everything, star, I'm getting everything there. Now, this means that, you see, if my directory is actually blank, but in this case, I can decide to create a directory. Let me call a directory Obama. Now, let me touch a file here, let's say Osama, or let me have a name such as, okay, let's just use Osama. So now when it comes to, let's say, checking, when it comes to checking the file permissions, if I press enter, you can see that the first one, Obama, is what? It's actually a directory. The second, Osama, is what? Is a text file. So whether you have it as, let me show you, whether you have it as, let me have another text file. So when it comes to this, LTR, yeah, EITs. So whether you come up with the, especially when it comes to creating a text file, as long as you're using a touch, it doesn't matter whether you use a name with an extension or just a name. So it will always create a what? It will always create a text file. So it's only for Obama here, it's a directory, and you can see that it has a different color, but for the text files, we have a uniform color. Now, that is not the point. The point here is just to know or to have a look at the file permissions. So for the for a directory, you can see that we have a permission, the read, write, and execute. And remember, I told you that we have 3 sections where groups can be, where these permissions can be applied in relation to the file. Because already the file, whether it is a directory, both Obama, Osama, and book.txt, they are being owned by a user called RH135, and all of them are actually on the same group, which is RH135. So if you are to come up with a different group, then it means that you can change. You can replace the RH135 to a different group of your own choice. So for that, it means that we need to have the permissions in related to different sections. For example, the first permissions here, which is read, write, and execute, leave alone the D. The D represents what? This actually shows you that it's a directory you're dealing with. Now, the hyphen means what? It's actually a file or a text file you're dealing with. So permissions will always start from the first here. Read, write, execute, that is for the users. Read, write, execute, that is for the groups. And then read, write, execute, this is for others. Again, when it comes to the text files, we have read, write, then hyphen. It must have the X, but for this case, we are missing the execute on the user portion or part. We also have the read, write, execute. Or again, this is a group part. We are missing the execute. And then the others, which comes last. Here we only have the read, but we are missing what? We are only missing the write and execute. And you can see that both the Osama and Obama and book, because they are actually, both of them are those TXT files or their text files or their files, they are being created by using the command touch. Both of them have similar what? They have similar permissions compared to Obama. So if I have to come up with the multiple directories or folders or directories by using mkdir, then it means that all their file permissions would be equal unless otherwise or unless altered. So basically, ACLs are used to make a flexible permission mechanism in Linux. So when it comes to ACLs, we have specific commands. And when it comes to these commands, you'll find out that we have like some commands, and these commands we're going to apply. For example, we have a command called set file, and we also have get file. So we will actually use or make use of this two commands: set files or file, or set FACL or get file. So set file is all about setting or ensuring that you have an ACL attached to a permission, but for this case, or to a file permission. Get file is only to display the contents of that. So we will get into that and see what happens. So you see, for example, from Linux manual pages, you can also get to know more about this. For example, you can have man for manual, and then this is ACL. Let's see. Now, you see, I'm trying to check the manual for ACL, trying to understand what is ACL. But in this case, ACL here is not a command. I'm just checking to understand more about ACL. So the name here I'm being given that it stands for Access Control Lists. That is something we talked about. Secondly, about the description, this manual page describes POSIX. And when it comes to POSIX access control lists, which are used to define more fine-grained discretionary access rights for files and directories. Now, for the ACL types, you'll find that we have this statement that every object can be thought of as having associated with it an ACL that governs the discretionary access to that object. And this ACL is referred to as an access ACL. So we have at least two types or types of ACLs. We have the access ACL, and then we also have the default ACL. So in line with that, a directory may also have an associated ACL that governs the initial access ACL for objects created within that directory. This ACL is referred to as default ACL. So when you talk about the different types of ACLs, we have one, the access ACL, and secondly, we also have the default ACL. Now, there's this concept of POSIX. What does POSIX stand for? POSIX actually stands for Portable Operating System Interface. Portable Operating System Interface. Now, so I want to exit, I just press X, and already I am out of that. Now, in this case, when it comes to using ACL, it's more like a way of administering permissions or ACL permissions to different files. So among the challenges of administering Linux in the modern business environment is actually the expectation that we can have, or we can and should manage who has access to what information. You see, it's just a matter of who has access to what information. So the only folks who needed access to Linux file systems could be categorized in a general way through Linux file system permissions. Now, we also have like probably whatever thing I've just talked about is all about reviewing the basics, because you cannot understand the ACLs without getting through the basic file permissions. For example, the Linux file system gives us 3 types of permissions, and the permissions are simplified in form of: one is the user, who is actually the owner of the file, the group, and others. So we have user, we have group, and then we have others. Then we have others. So again, you can have this like you can have it as U, G, let's say GO. So that is a representation. So it's either you use it in full, but system usually recognizes the UGO. So if you want to hold, you can have something like UGO. Now, in this case, you'll find that we have these permissions again. We have read, write, execute. Now, read represents 4. Write represents 2, and then others represent 1. So we have a total of 7 permissions. So I know that I talked about this in our previous tutorial. So it means that a file must always be owned by 3 what? Either a user, a group, and others. Or we can say who has access to the file. Of course, user automatically has access to it. And again, as long as it's the owner of the file, he can actually have access to it. At the same time, he also owns the file. So we have the group who can own the file, because when we talk about a group, then it means that we should have multiple users in the group, and then others. So we have UGO. Again, on reviewing the basics is that with these permissions, we can actually grant 3 permissions. And actually it's 5, but we will get to that in a minute. And then, of course, we're talking about granting 3 types of access. You give either by read, give either by write, or give either by execute. So these levels of access are often adequate in many cases. And say that you have a directory where files from the accounting department live, you might set these permissions to that. So if you're talking about a directory, let's say, for example, a directory, let's say we have a directory called accounting. When you come up and check the file permissions, of course, let me clear everything here. Okay, and then clear. So I always like to work on a clean board. So here you can come again, and then again. Yeah. Now you can see that we have these permissions for accounting directory. So whether you have the Obama directory, you have the accounting directory, it's actually the same file system. So the same file permissions that will be applied to any newly created directory, unless you alter them. Unless you alter them. So in this case, it means that if you want to, let's say you want to use, or you want to change the group ownership from either this to this, we can actually do that. So by now, I know that you are in a position to view or to know which way to go. If I have to, let's say, ensure that this file falls under a certain group, then I can do this and this. Now, let's continue on this part. So we were talking about, like, for example, the accounting directory, and you can see that we have. So it means that for users, they have full permissions. For groups, they have full permissions. And then for others, they have full permissions minus what? Minus the execute. So in this case, the user who actually owns the accounting directory is actually what? RH135. And the group is actually RH135. Now let's view the available groups. Let's view the available groups. So I want to have, let's say, -n. Let me have the last 5, and then etc group. Now you can see that we have what? We have RH135 as a group. We have RH139 as a group. Now let me also show you the users. So we can say etc pass WD. Which is it? Okay, I've not issued the number. Let's say 5. Now look. Okay, let's see. Yeah. So in this case, you can see that I have actually sorted out, because in this configuration file quality C group, we have so many files. So I've only picked the last 5 lines so that we can see what? We can see RH135, which is actually the group. Now, the second thing I've actually sorted out here, the etc pass WD. etc pass WD is a configuration file attached to what? Attached to usernames. So again, you can see that we have what? We have RH135. So under etc pass WD, RH135 is the user's name. Then under etc group, RHL8 is the group. That is the reason why you are able to see that we have RHL8 for accounting. That is the first, which represents the user. And we have the second RHL8, which represents what? The group. Now, which other group do we have here? Now, I showed you, so let me just add a group. Group add. Okay, let me clear the screen. So we can have like group add. Let me say, put my name. Now I'm being denied because I should operate as what? I should operate as root. So let me switch as root. And then I will just come back and say group add Sammy. It's added. So let me go back to RHL8. I'm switching back to the user and then let me clear. Now, if I want to check the groups, whether the group has been created, I'll just say tail-n, let's say 5, and then etc group, because I've actually come up with a newly created group. So the group is Sammy here, although we also have country as a group. But when it comes to this particular file, LTRH, which is actually accounting, the file is actually being owned by user RHL8, but also a primary group has been assigned to it, which is actually RHL8. So how can I change? So if I want to change this group, first of all, let's see, we have change group, GP, okay. So when it comes to using this, first of all, let me see, CHRP for change. Let me see whether we have something set. Okay, so I think GP, okay. So when it comes to changing the permission or the group, we need to use a command. Now this command is change group. And yeah, so it is CHGRP hyphen, let's say man, so that we can see. Yeah, so we have CHG for change, and then of course we have CH for change, then GRP for group. So it's basically used to change group ownership. That is what I wanted. So when it comes to changing this group, we will just use GRP, and then remember we have a new group called Sammy. Of course, let me have, first of all, I need to have RHL8 and then Sammy. Okay, I'm trying first of all so that we can see what happens. Cannot access that. Okay, so RHL8 and then accounting. Let's see, no such file or directory, operation not permitted, of accounting operation. Let me just clear it and just see what happens. What went wrong? So here we need to have, so first of all, let me just switch as this part because we can operate good on this. So CHGRP, let me have Sammy as the group. And then the second one, of course, let me have it Sammy, and then we have RHL8. Then we have accounting. So cannot access RHL8, no file or permissions. Okay. RHL8, full colon Sammy. Let's see, invalid group. So when I bring it back, RHL8. Okay, Sammy. Okay, invalid group, which is actually Sammy. Now, we have a way of now to do this. And Okay. So let me just do this. Okay. So I think successfully, let's see, ls-ltr. Yeah. So now you can see what? Let me clear and then bring back. Now you can see that I have successfully managed to change the group. I have successfully managed to change the group. So the existing group, the initial group that was there was RH8, but this time round we have RH8. I mean, we have SAMI in place of RH8. So this is how to change. This is how to change the group. For example, if I talk about, let's see, etc, which other group is there? Now we have country. How do I change it to country? So you will just say GRP, no, CHGRP, and then put the name of the group, which is country. For my case, it's country, and then the directory, which is accounting. Press enter. Now, when you come back and recheck it, now you can see that the group has been changed now from SAMI to country. Now, this is just by the way. This is just by the way. But remember, we are talking about what? ACLs. So getting into ACLs, you have to get the basics of what? You have to get the basics of the file permissions the way they are. Now, with these permissions, we also have something called the special permissions. And you can also use the special permissions to control settings, like who actually owns new files created in that directory. You see, we can have a directory that is being owned by a user, but we can also have subdirectories that are being owned by different users. So with that, you have to use a special permissions. In this case, you're supposed to use something called the sticky bit, which actually controls whether members of the group can delete each other's files. However, that's outside the scope of this discussion. So probably that is something else that you can talk about that. Now, this brings us to the ACLs. How do we view the current ACL? How do we view the current ACLs? You see, what if you have an accounting, let's say an accounting intern or a student or a tutor or an instructor intern, and this intern needs to be able to read certain files or even just the files owned by a manager, or maybe people in the sales department so needs to have access to the accounting owners files to create invoices for probably the manager's team. So for this case, you need to consider things such as what? ACLs. So the situation that probably is in hand is a little bit tricky because you need to apply all these permissions. But with regular permissions, each file and directory can have only one user and a group owner at a time. So the type of situation is what Linux access control lists tries to do, what intends to resolve. Now, ACLs allow us to apply a more specific set of permissions to a file or directory without necessarily changing the base ownership and permissions. They let us tack on access for other users or groups. So you see, ACLs does not actually come to alter or to modify or to remove the regular permissions, that is the read, write, execute applied to every point or part, whether it's the users, the groups, and others. But it's all about what? Adding special kind of. Now, we can start from viewing the current ACL. And by viewing, we are using this particular command. So remember, first of all, that if ILS, we have this particular directory. So how do we view ACLs? So we will just use this command at Facel and then use accounting. Just like that, press enter. This is all about viewing what? Viewing the ACL permissions. Now you can see that the file is actually what? Is a directory because we have the / coming at the end. Who owns the file is RH8. Which group is? The group is country. And if you remember, if I change this group now to, let's say, let's bring it back to SAMI. and press enter, and then go back and have get facile, you can see now that the group already is here, which is actually who? Is actually Sami. So this is actually how we are able to view the ACLs. So you can see again that the group has been changed to Sami. Now the user, this is the permissions. Let me show you ls-ltr or -ld. Let's see. Now you can see that, okay, sorry for that. So let me just give it more LTR so that we can get what this name. Now you can see that for the users, it is RWX. Here it is what? It is RWX. For the groups, it is RWX. That is based on the ACLs. For here, it is RWX. For others, it is R-X. Here again, it is R-X. So that is how you can view regular permissions just by using ls-ltr, and how you can view the ACL permissions by using get facile. So this is the facile way, or the get facile way, or the ACL way, and this one is only the regular way. So when it comes to that, we can now see that there are no ACLs on this directory. Yeah, probably that could be the question. Okay, what am I looking at? Are there ACLs or are there no ACLs? So there are no ACLs at the moment, or there are no ACLs on this directory called accounting, because the only permissions listed are for the user, group, and others. In this case, that's to be expected because I just created this directory directly with you, and we're going to do what? To assign, or we're going to add the default ACLs or the ACLs. Now, how do we set ACLs now? Now, to set ACL, we need to have what? Set facile. Now, you see, I'm going to give you now that when you talk about setting the default ACL, you need to use the word set facile -d. -d is for the default ACL. And then you can come -m, that is for the modify. Sometimes you can have even X for remove. And then the word accounting, that is the directory. And then which permissions do you want to apply? Let's say RWX. Here I am applying what? I'm applying the default ACL. And then to accounting, you see. So we can have to which directory? Accounting. So if I press enter, I think invalid argument near character 1. Let's see. So first of all, let me have set facile. Okay, so you can see that we have a lot. First of all, let me just start it again. So you can use actually the set facile, and then -d, -m, and then we have the accounting. Now here we can put RWX, then we can have what? Accounting. So here this is our directory. We are applying something called the default what? The default ACLs. So to where? To accounting. If I press enter, what invalid argument near character 1? What is this? Let me just remove modify, because we are supposed to have it. Okay, let me just have it here. Invalid again. So this is how it's supposed to be. Let me just remove -m. Set facile, help more. Okay, let me come. Let's say -m. Press enter. Option -m. Invalid argument near character 1. Okay. So let me just do this. Why is this happening? Let's say -m, -d. what? So for this one, it's supposed actually to go through, and don't know what's happening. Now for this case, let me have a different folder, because now do we have a file, the accounting? It's supposed to give us something. Set first all, let me just do it again. So get parcel accounting. Okay, let me add accounting full column. Let me just press enter. So option -M, invalid argument near character 1. So which argument is that? Okay. Okay, let me just do this. Okay, so let me create another directory. Let's have it like ABS. When it comes to, let's say, get parcel for the ABS. Okay, so let me set it so that you can see the differences. So set so setting to that, set parcel -D for the default, because the reason why I'm using D is the default ACL. -M for modify. I need accounting, and then let me say RWX. Let's say RWX. And then from there, where are we adding to? We are adding it to let's say we are adding it to accounting. It's not even bringing. Okay, press enter. Okay, let me just use a different. Oh, it's not accounting. It's actually ABS. Full colon RW, and then accounting. Press enter, one character. Okay, so let me just use this set parcel, and then -M. Yeah, user full colon. Okay, full colon. Let's say accounting, and then let me put her, and then the file name. Character 3, set parcel -M U and R. Okay, so let me just do this. So let me just have specifically. Let's have a look at ABC. Now, let's assume that I want to add execute, because we are looking at the RW. The user already has RWX. Let's see whether we can add the group to have full. So we are missing the right. Let's see whether we can give full permission to the group, especially attached to ABS. Set parcel. And in this case, I can see -M. For this case, we are talking, okay, first of all, let me switch it. We are operating as root. So let me switch it as RH135. Clear. So ls. Okay, so when I go to get parcel, ABS. Now let's give full permissions by using ACLs to group. So I'll just say set parcel, and then we can talk about -m, and then we can have a group, and then the file is ABS, and then I can give W for the right, and then the file name is ABS. Okay, so this one is about the directory. Sorry for that. Let me touch. Okay, let's have book.txt. Let me try it the other way around. So when I come to get FASL book.txt, you can have this. And then let me just use, okay. So I'll just say set FASL. Then I can say -m, let's say full colon RX, and then ABS. Wow, option -m. Why are we getting errors on this? Okay, let me say groups. Here we're getting errors. Now, for this case, we have this particular command, which is get FASL. It's basically used to get ACLs attached to a file or just to display. Set FASL is all about getting or trying to set. And for this case, when it comes to setting the files, we need to use either, if you want to modify, you're supposed to use the -m for modification, -x to remove, and the specification probably would be the user group folder, the permissions we want to set. And I don't know what is wrong with my file. Let me repeat it once more. Product, and then here we have, let's have a directory, or okay, let's have a directory called that is already under the root. I'm creating it under root. Then we call it like police. I use -ltr. So we have this police file using the get FASL police. We have this. Now let me say for set FASL, and then -d, -m, and then we can have police. This time around, let me add it to have read write execute, and then have police. So I think there's something happening here. First of all, let's try invalid argument near character 1. Let me see that error. Now, first of all, let me just do this because we are having, let me just have like grant. Let me grant this permission first of all, set FASL, and then -m, let's say -m, d, u for user. So user, then we can have it as RH8 full colon. Then you can give it like RX for execute. And then we can give it accounting. First of all, let's see. Yeah. So this is like issuing permissions. These are issuing or granting ACL permission for user B. So I think that is something that I forgot, that we need to grant them permission first of all. So it means that -M is for modification or modify. D is for the default, and then user, who is RHL8. I'm trying to give what read and execute. So this time round, if I come back to now get parcel to accounting, now you can see, yes, we have all this here. We have all these permissions. So these are extra what? It means that with the new directory, you are not able to view. You cannot actually view the ACLs unless you grant permission to that particular user from the root. You grant file permissions from the root. And the same concept can follow. So if you want to grant permissions, you can grant on that, and that is the way to go about. So in this case, now we are in a position now to see. You see, we have like the default others, the masking, the group, the user, and the user. So this is very important. This is a very important concept, and also almost to forget. Now, because I'm operating as root, I want us to switch to RHL8. And for this one, I want us to touch a file. Let's touch as tester or test. So if I can do that, so you can ls, you can see that I have test. So test, if I just -l ltr, press enter, you can see that the test is being owned by user who? RH8, and owned by RH8, which is the group. But for the police is different. It's being owned by root user, and it's being, under a group called root. So what if I created this file, or what if we have this particular file? Can we get now the results? Let's say get parcel, then test. Now you can see now that here we do not have. So what happens if you come up with a file? You see, with that, it means that you won't see the permissions. But for this case, we're talking about what? The ACL permissions. You cannot actually see the ACL permissions. So what happens is, it's because that the permissions, or we do not have the exact permissions. So, so with a good experience with this, you can actually give, because already you have the ability of assigning some files or giving a files to that particular directory. And by this, you can actually use the same concept, set parcel -m, and then just say RHL8, because it's the user. So if you have any other user, you can use it. Then you can give all permissions, and then you can say accounting and press enter. And press enter. So now, if you come back and say get parcel test and press enter, already we are not actually seeing. You see, because for this case, we need to attach what? We need to attach the ACLs. It's actually a file that's already within the domain of RH8. So what happens is, if you don't want this user, let's say, to come up with such a file, how do you do it now? So let's say, so what happens is, let's go to root, red hat, and then clear. And then let me just repeat the same. Okay, sorry for that. Let me just use set parcel, and then -m, -m, and then let's say RHL8. Let me repeat the same concept. RHL8 :RWX, the RWX, and then accounting. So now, if you get parcel test, yeah, still have the same concept. And what we need to do here, because permissions are very important when it comes to this, we need to issue, let's say, .w. You can see again that I'm actually trying to get the parcels under home, and it's actually the same concept. So in other words, you can now come back and say what you want to alter. You want to alter what? These permissions. So if you want to change these permissions, let's say for the groups using ACL, you can actually use the set ACL permissions. So let's see what happens when you come back to this. So we have the tester. So let me have like set parcel, and for this case -d -m, and we need to have, let's say, test, and then for the test I can give, of course we can say groups :test rwx, and then test. So still we have some arguments coming here. Let me have it here. Okay. Oh, I'm operating as. So we have so many concepts related to this issue. Okay, RH135. So we have so many concepts when it comes to that: get parcel and set parcel. Now, probably you can actually alter the ownership. You can actually honor the alter. If, for example, RHL has a directory or has to come up with a directory, it means that you have to attach the ownership, or the RHL is the owner of that particular file. So you can also make the accounting group, or make the group to be the accounting, or accounting as the name of the group. So in this case, you can actually use different ways. Here, I can say I want mkdir / let's say let's have a directory called Obama, or let's have something like let's say cost is the name of the directory. Now I can change the ownership. You see, if I come ls-ltr, you can see the ownership of cost. It's RH135. Now I can also use this different way, ch1, and then we can say we have, remember we have SAMI as, we have SAMI, we have countries, so we can have SAMI holding the group, or we have RHL9 as a user. We have RHL9 as the user, and then we can attach it to a different group, let's say SAMI, and then we can have .cost. Press enter. Operation not permitted, changing ownership. Okay, so changing ownership. Okay, let's say country. So in this case, I can have, let's say, user product. I can say user had, let's say user 1, and then password user 1. Let me give product successfully. So that is how to assign a user. So if you want to check, probably you can go one step back, and then ls. Now you can see we have, okay, one step again, ls. Now you can see that we have user 1. So all these are users. Now going back to this, let's say RHL8 cd desktop. So when I come to desktop, we have this particular file. So we have a user called what? Kenya. So let me just on ch on. I'm trying to change the ownership, and I have the user. So the user is US1. And then the directory is ABS, or we can use accounting. Okay, we can use the accounting, and then we can have a cost. Is it cost? Okay. So user 1 full colon accounting. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is to change the ownership. Of ls-ltr. So we have this ownership. This is being owned by user RH135, but I need to change that to another user. So ch1, let's say user 1 full colon, let's say the group is RH135, and then the cost. Yeah, so I think I've managed. So if I go back to this, you can now see that user 1 is the owner now. RH135 is no longer the owner of the cost file, is now the user 1. So by using ch1, you can change the ownership of a file, and by using RH135, you can also change, by using ch group, you can change the group of a file. So with that, I think that now summarizes our information, but in conclusion, we need to dig more. So by just understanding both the set factors and the get factors is actually a good point to go by. So it's only about a matter of understanding the basics, but ACLs at some point can be a little bit confusing. And so I encourage you to give man pages, try to learn more about the set factor and get factor. And yeah, you'll get more interesting things ahead. So we have a lot of info, or we have a lot of information related to this. And we have, like, up to the point you need to understand about AC Linux roles, probably the domains and the types. And yeah, you need to get to know more about AC Linux. So I think with good time, probably I'll come back and give another tutorial on ACLs. So thank you, and see you in the next video.